TV, and we have a very special guest today. We are here with Jule Campbell. She's an award-winning, wonderful documentary filmmaker, and we're here to talk about Beyond the Gaze, about her mother-in-law, a documentary that is now on Netflix, correct?
No, we wish it was on Netflix.
Sorry.
No,
I'm
that's totally
manifesting it.
fine. Yeah, maybe hopeful thinking Netflix, but it's on the festival circuit. We just played in Sarasota and we're playing in a couple of the other theaters and then festivals, and then we're opening at IFC Center in New York City in June. So we're starting to get it out there as far as distribution and hoping that we attract a large streamer.
Absolutely. It's something that everybody needs to see. I was able to see it at the Sarasota Film Festival, and it was really interesting. And honestly, I was very moved by it, and I was compelled to do this interview with you because it was so touching from a personal level, since she was your mother-in-law, and also from the groundbreaking level of what she did and what she accomplished, and what the legacy and the ramifications are now. So, why did you choose to do it during the pandemic, and why at that point in her life is a big question.
It's a great question. I've been a documentarian most of my life and had wanted to do a film on her forever and never found the right timing. And after she retired in 1996, she had wanted to write a book. And so she kept everything because she knew she was going to write a book, slides and postcards and Super 8. And we moved in with her during the pandemic to just check in on her, make sure she was eating well. She was living with Bruce, who's my ex-husband, her son. It's a modern family story, and we all love each other.
Oh.
Um, and I just found her to be very prolific at that time. And I just kept taking my iPhone out and started filming her because everything she said I wanted to remember. And then I was kind of nervous to ask Bruce if I could finally do the documentary. And I was like, can I just please come back with my professional cameras? We need to, it's now or never. And she was ready. And I talked to her about it and she loved the idea. And so we came back with our cameras. We kind of moved in. And what was beautiful is like we both gained agency and we became closer through the process. We've always been close. She's my life mentor. It's wonderful to have a woman like that in your life, but I realized through this process just how much she affected me and how important it was for her to share her story.
Sure. So, a few things that I have to ask you. When she started, because a lot of our audience haven't seen the documentary, so hopefully they will be able to see it soon. But when she started in, I believe it was the 60s, correct? The early 60s, and she had an education, and they told her that she needed to work in retail because the other people that she was going to be working with wouldn't help her out unless she had retail experience. That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. It was like kind of anti, like, don't go to college, just go straight to retail. But that was kind of how the fashion business was back then. So, she wanted to be a journalist, but she wanted to be a journalist in fashion. So they're like, go work in a store, which, she did. And it makes sense because she really got her chops learning from the ground up.
Sure. Yeah. And if you're in New York, obviously it's a lot more, it's on a higher level than if you're in someplace in the middle of the country, it's a little bit different. Yeah. Be a longer
Exactly.
road, a longer
Yeah.
road.
Yeah.
So she worked so she did find her way into journalism, and tell us a little bit about the story. Did she go work for a fashion magazine and then she segued to Sports
Yeah.
Illustrated? How did she end up there?
Worked for this PR company, as an assistant, and then she had her eye on Glamour magazine. Glamour magazine was it back in the day, and she got a job in Glamour. And what I found out through making the film, she this woman named Betty Downey took her under her wing, and as I was researching Betty Downey, I realized it was Robert Downey Jr.'s grandmother.
Really?
And
That's
is
crazy.
that crazy? And
Uh-huh.
so Julie was a hard worker and she was smart and she was dedicated and she got in there and this was her passion. And so Betty Downey, she wanted to be in with the fashion editor. She got promoted. She ended up working with Andy Warhol at
Oh,
Glamour magazine. She had one of those amazingly glamorous, 1950s, 60s New York City life. And then Sports Illustrated, you know, start, I think it began in like the mid 1950s. And, they were looking for journalists and they just happened to be looking for a fashion editor to work on like what people wear. Back then it was like, what do ladies wear to a football game? Or, what's your what kind of ski wear do you wear? And so she got hired to do that under this amazing editor named Fred Smith. She actually worked with Pucci. Like there's some gorgeous slides I found of like he literally collaborated with Pucci and created the most amazing Pucci ski wear, which I wish I could find.
see that.
I know. It's just the slides and the outfits. I digitized 10,000 slides for this film.
Wow.
He
Wow.
kept over 40,000. I'm still digitizing, but it's like as we in the next 6 months, as we like go forward with our release, because we're doing hopefully playing in more theaters and then we're gonna go to streamers in like September, October. I'm gonna keep posting on my Instagram like little gems that I found. So everyone should check out my Instagram.
I
But yeah,
have, and I've seen those Pucci. I love those. I wish I could still find those because I would love to wear that, right?
you would
So,
look great in that. I could see, yeah, like she kept everything. So I still like I was going through all the slides, but even like the jewelry I found and like the designer clothes and it's just amazing. And she had such great taste. So then she started in as so basically how the Sports Illustrated Swimsuit Issue started was back then in the mid 60s, the Super Bowl wasn't what it was now. And they played it in December. So January and February was like a dead month for sports. And it was like pre basketball playoffs, pre when hockey was like really big. So they were just looking for something to sell the magazine. And they had put a woman in like swimming on the cover the year before, and they saw that it got some action. So the editor of the magazine named Andre Laguerre, this dashing Frenchman, had his eye on Julie too, and asked her how would she like to put a pretty woman on the cover, you know, of Sports Illustrated. And she, as a fashion editor and as a woman, was like, first, they need to be sporty. It needs to go with like what Sports Illustrated is. I don't want to just shoot women in bathing suits to objectify them. And they need to be healthy. She was all about health. She was all about like the woman that was not too skinny, the sporty woman. So she took that and ran with it.
it's great. So, there's so many things that there are so many questions that come out of that. So, I'm sure at the time it evolved organically. We're looking at it, from the future to that time. you know, it's interesting to think about how important culturally and how iconic that magazine and that particular, swimsuit issue became. She really spearheaded so many careers of these supermodels. I mean, she probably was instrumental in the ideology of supermodel, and of, being fit and also being beautiful, so many different things. I know you touched on that a little bit, but I mean, it's a master class. It's almost like a master's degree in, sociology, right?
Yeah, I love that you said that. That was like why it was important to tell her story because like how do we know? This is what's great about documentaries. How would anyone know about this woman who is so important in the fabric of the cultural history of America and the women that she discovered and her taste in how she did the magazine and the way she did protect the women that were in it. It was an all male sports magazine. So it's like going to work for a bunch of jocks in the
The tough
1960s, right?
cookie.
It's like, right, like nothing
Yeah,
against jocks, and it's great, but like imagine like she
that's
had to
right.
figure out how to navigate this world, how to
Yeah.
get what she wanted, how to protect the models so they weren't objectified,
Yeah.
and make money for the magazine. And she did it, and she created one of the most profitable magazine issues in American publishing history. And the film, I hope, shows like who she is and how she made those decisions. But I think it's because of who she was is why it was so successful, because A, she learned how to navigate that world. She worked with the guys and it was great. B, like she protected the model. So she got like, Christy Brinkley wanted to work with her. Cheryl Tiegs, Elle Macpherson, they felt comfortable with her. So they came back. So she created these superstars, but the superstars returned. And it was kind of win-win for both of them. And then when you look at what Christy did, what Elle did, what Cheryl Tiegs did, what Tyra Banks did, like the careers, because Julie worked with smart women, so they took it and ran with it more in our culture. So I'm really glad you touched on that. I agree, it is a master class, and
Class. I would take that class. Honestly, I mean, maybe a school of journalism should teach that class because it really was, it's an iconic piece of history. And those women also that were around it is iconic. And there's so many other, social issues that go along with it too, that we could talk about. But I just think it's really very
I agree.
interesting.
Well, one of our goals is we do want to talk to women in business and show the film for them, and go to universities and you know show the film for women's studies and feminist studies, and because what I'm really happy about is how it is affecting women of all ages, and especially even like women from their 20s to mid 30s who really don't know, but they love this story because it's a woman who just shows the way and paved the way, and so inspiring, and is so honest about it, and who really had no self-esteem issues.
Here's the question. Like you knew her. Did she know that she was paving the way for other women, or was she just pursuing? I mean, it probably was multi-layered because she was paving the way for so many women on so many different levels, but she was also paving the way for herself with her career that she loved. So, did she realize after a while what she had done and accomplished, or was she
I,
just focused?
it's a great question, and I don't think she did. I think it's like all of us, like
Yeah,
she was passionate about her career, she was
yeah,
passionate about like the art she was making, and she was a very good person. She was good to other, she was all about lifting other women up.
yeah.
So I think that those passions made it successful. But I don't know. She was very humble. Like, at times she'd be like, it was just a career. It was just a job, you know.
But in the film, I was blown away by that. And I
Yeah.
realized she was older looking back on it, but it's way more than that. I mean, it's huge. When I tell people, because I've really been talking about it a
You.
lot to
I
different people.
appreciate
No,
it.
I mean, I love it. Honestly, I'm not just saying it because I'm here talking to
Yeah.
you. And when I tell people about it, they're like, where can I see it? I want to see it. And
Yeah.
I send them to your Instagram and I send them to your website. But it's a
I
really
mean,
important story. It
it is such
is.
an important story, and we're an indie film, and it's so hard to get you. You'd think that, we would have been on Netflix and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And it's like,
Yeah.
and it's a woman's story, and you think that like we want to get it out there, and everyone, it's so important, and everyone that sees it feels that way. So I really thank you for sharing that, because that's what we need. We need to build like word of mouth. We need to get this momentum going. Women need that boost. We need other women like Julie to inspire us, to keep us
Percent.
going.
Yeah, because there's so many muddled, muddy messages out there now that somebody like that needs to be lifted up, and it's so important. And thank you for doing that film. So now when you were talking to some of the supermodels as well, I thought Paulina was very interesting because she's also doing some interesting things. I do follow her on Instagram and she's doing some cool things about aging and beauty and things like that. But did they have a special relationship? And Elle, it seemed like she also had a special relationship too.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Pauline is doing is so important and
Yeah.
interesting. Like, as a woman of a certain age, like,
Right.
she inspires me and helps me embrace who I am. And, I think Pauline embraces that as a role model. Same with Elle. Elle is really embracing her age, sharing health. But yeah, the women that I invited to be part of the film were like women, Julie's core ladies. Like, she would come home from a shoot and tell me stories about Elle or Paulina or Rashamba and or Carol Alt. And so those, or Kathy Ireland, like, they were all really close to her. They called her, they got till the day she died. I would be there. She'd get a call from Kathy Ireland, Carol All, Paulina. They all checked in. They all appreciated what Julie did for her. So she was close with them. Like, she was a mother figure. And again, back when they came, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, women needed another woman that was older that could look out for you.
So here they are, this is before we had different kinds of communication, things communication was a little, I guess they could pick up a phone, but here they are in these exotic locations. They're in Morocco or they're someplace in the jungle of Brazil where, I'm sure communication was limited.
Yeah.
And imagine if you went with just men, not that all men are, difficult, but it would have been a precarious situation at the very least.
Oh, that's spot on. Kim Alexis talks about that, like going to Africa and like you're sitting there in a bikini, in this country, like this blonde
Right.
woman, and Julie was very protective and they felt protected. And you do need a woman in that situation. And that's kind of why, like I said, I feel like it was so successful, because if it was a man, it might have been Playboy. It might have been turned into something that it wasn't. And it might not have been successful. It might have sizzled and burned, but she always rode the edge.
That's why it was so successful. And that's brilliant. That really is brilliant. She rode the edge, and people could argue on different, they could argue and say, well, she shouldn't have rode the edge. She should have done this or she should have done that. But you have to think of the cultural constructs during that era. The 90s wasn't that long ago, but the 80s was, the 70s, and cultural constructs were quite different back then. Look at Tyra Banks. When was that issue where she put her on the cover? And
That was
Mushamba, that was
96, and she was the first woman of
hard to believe.
color on the cover.
Hard to
And
believe.
uh,
Shocking.
she had a fight for that, and she
That's
fought for women of
shocking.
color her whole life. But yeah, she did ride her edge, and I think that ride the edge, and I think she wouldn't call herself a feminist, but like I think, like, good for her. Like, who would give up that job? She was a fashion editor in the 1960s. Woke wasn't a thing back then, like, she wasn't going to be like, oh, well, I'm not
Right,
going to go to the most exotic islands and do my dream job, and because I'm objectifying women, I'm going to take this and I'm going to protect the women. I'm going to make beautiful pieces of art. I'm going to
right.
empower the women I work with. And I think, like, you look, and I also think it, like, even into what's happening today with what, like, MJ Day is doing, is like, whether some people like it, some people don't like it, but these young influencers are pretty empowered, and they're they're to me, they're the next level of feminists, because they're taking in charge of their own image, and
Right.
they're controlling what they want, and it's up to them. And Stacy says in the film, we can be sexy, you can't sexualize us. Stacey Williams says that. And I love that quote, because it's like, women, we could be sexy if we want to, we could be unsexy if we want to, but it's the
Right.
men and the male gaze that sexualizes it. And that's why it's called Beyond the Gaze, because we're
Yeah.
kind of like taking that deep dive.
Right. I love that. It wasn't just a typical title, it was a very interesting title, which is, very compelling, which is why people would want to see it for sure.
Thank
So I
you.
want to ask one little hard question. I hate to ask a hard question, but so she did not get equal pay, which is really a bone of contention for, I'm sure, a lot of people. And it didn't seem like she was really willing to pursue any type of, legal action. And she should have been compensated quite a bit more than what she was. So what was her mentality? Did you ever talk to her about that? Or
There was, I mean, all the time because like there was no legal action at that point. You know what I mean? Like
right,
you couldn't just go to HR and complain. It was probably
right,
some man at HR. Like, what did you do? You got fired. Like,
right,
or how much money would you need to do? Like, this is also how far we have come. Actually,
right.
there was a legal suit of discrimination against Sports Illustrated by a group of women in the 70s that fought about that.
Really?
But, she was so busy. She enjoyed her job.
Yeah.
She was frustrated that she didn't get equal pay. And, I hope now she would, but it really was a part of the times, and we touch on how frustrated she was and how she kept asking for raises and, yeah,
It's a shame. That's a shame.
yeah,
Because
it is.
if this was the same, you never know how things would fall. But, I'm sure that wouldn't be the case if she was still working there.
Yeah, it's frustrating because, we were with her towards the end of her life and like she didn't have a lot of money. We could barely, afford home health aid. And, I remember everyone used to say to her throughout the years, you need to get a piece of that business. You need to get a piece of that business. Why are you not getting, percentages? But, it was a huge corporation. They didn't work that way. They should have given her huge bonuses, right? Like huge bonuses.
Huge.
And
she,
and
she
you
made,
could,
she was instrumental in the success of that and it's a legacy brand. It's probably the only reason why that magazine is still out there, because
totally.
being in the publishing industry, print magazines are essentially, sadly, there's no way for it to really track accurately your advertising, and what impact it's making. And the ad dollars have definitely shrunk. So, they're on their way out, print. Everybody knows that. Yeah. So,
Totally. I think that's why some of the younger viewers love our film because we really track the magazine. But I agree, like it's mind-blowing, but it's also again shows how far we come, how far we have yet to go. Like woman in the 1960s, all male universe, and Sports Illustrated. It was an amazing magazine. And she's also competing with like all the most famous sports writers at the time. There was jealousy there. Some of them, like a lot of them, did not like the swimsuit issue. They didn't think it was
sure.
valid. They got jealous of the attention that it got. So she was dealing
Interesting.
with so many stressful factors, like when I found that footage of her working in the office at the Time Warner building, which was like you know gold to a documentary filmmaker. And like
Yeah.
see, like there's a couple of times with her face, it's like the intensity of the job on her face.
Yeah.
This is what to me documentary is so wonderful about. It's like catching them in the moment of when it happened through that archival footage and really getting to see what they went through.
Did you get that footage? Did somebody film them while they were? I mean, because that wasn't a thing back then. For to be filmed while you're working, your day-to-day life, people just did what they did. Because I work with a lot of older people
Yeah,
in music, and they don't even think about documenting things that they're doing, even if they're speaking
I
in front of a
know.
hundred thousand
They
people.
have to document it.
They don't document it,
Yeah.
and I have to reiterate, please document it, but they don't. So how come it was
It
documented? Do
is
you know?
literally prolific. Like she literally took a Super 8 camera with her in the 60s and
Great.
70s. And then when I was making the film, like I would find because she was such a hoarder and brought everything home. Like I would trip over these Super 8 canisters in the dining room. And, I, and then I don't know if she, in the back of her mind, she wanted to make a documentary or she knew this was important to document, but she always had her own camera. So that footage of her in her office was like, she had her camera and she just said to her assistant, shoot this. I don't know what for, but thank God it's there. And like when we got funding for the film by EUE Documentaries, my most amazing producer, EP, Sharon Shuttleworth, who's my partner in this, like when we were able to see what was on those tapes, like never before seen footage of Christy Brinkley on her first shoot for Sports Illustrated, or Cheryl Teagues, and how exciting that was. And like, it's an I couldn't even share everything in the film. Like I'm still, as we, you know, bring the film out, we're gonna continue to share things, online, and because it's a pity to just have it, sit on my hard drive. So I can't wait to keep like posting things, never before seen footage. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. So my next question is so what's next for you? So you're are you working on another documentary? What other projects are you working on?
thank you. The most important thing is, I worked on this for, this is almost 5 years. So
Wow.
launching this with the care and joy that we are. So until like the fall, I'm focusing on that. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple of projects. Can't really say what they are, but like I'm always interested in projects. I love biodocs. I love films about extraordinary lives. And I'm talking to some people about different things and just exploring things. I'm working on a hybrid short film that I've been wanting to work on for a long time. That's kind of a mix between narrative and documentary. And it's a social experiment. And that'll be kind of fun too. So there's a
Yeah.
lot going on, and it's, I'm privileged and blessed to be able to do this.
Beyondthegaze.com. Jule, it's Jule Campbell or Julie Campbell?
Julie,
Julie, but no I.
oh,
Jule.
she was born with an eye and she took it out, I guess for flair. But
I
it
love
is
it.
I know. But
I
she
love it.
called her Jewel, but Julie was kind of how she went, what she went by. So yeah.
Fantastic. So we look forward to seeing it streaming. We look forward to seeing it at the theater if you get a chance to go to the film festivals where it's playing, and it should be at every film festival that you choose to enter.
Thank you.
Please get a chance to see it on the big screen because it really is really moving.
Yeah, if people go to our website and it's just juliecampbell.com, we'll have updates. We'll be posting like where the theaters are when we do get to streaming. We just signed with a very exciting distributor that we haven't announced the name yet, so we can't share that yet, but there will be ways to see it. And please contact me, interact on Instagram. I love talking about the film.
On Instagram, Beyond the Gaze on Instagram
On the
and
Gaze Film
Facebook.
and
Yes.
Facebook.
Are you on
Yeah.
TikTok?
I'm not, yeah, a little bit. I think
Okay.
under Beyond the Gaze Film or Jule Campbell. I have to get more into I have to do more TikToks for sure.
Definitely. Well, thank
Yeah.
you guys for watching. It's Susan Short. This is FBTV. We're here with Jule Campbell talking about Beyond the Gaze film, about the Sports Illustrated issue, and Julie Campbell, who spearheaded it. Thank you for watching.